Close your eyes and picture this: the world you know, the stars above, and the ground beneath your feet, all lines of code in an elaborate simulation. Could life be nothing more than a digital dream, orchestrated by intelligence beyond our comprehension? In this journey, we'll drift through the mysteries of science, philosophy, and imagination, exploring what it means if Earth is not what it seems. It begins with a whisper you cannot quite place, a quiet suspicion that the patterns you see are too flawless, too carefully arranged, as if the universe itself were designed not for chaos, but for precision. Every sunrise arrives with mathematical certainty. Every planet drifts in orbit with tireless obedience. Every atom dances to rules that never bend, never stray, never fail. And as you linger on this thought, a strange unease settles in your chest, for you realize that reality has never once behaved like an accident. It has always behaved like a script. Consider the constants of physics, numbers so exact that a fraction's difference would unravel stars or erase life entirely. Why do they rest in such delicate balance, poised as though adjusted by an unseen hand, like parameters fine-tuned in the hidden settings of a vast simulation? You glance toward the night sky and sense that its depth, its shimmering constellations, may be nothing more than a grand backdrop, pixels arranged to convince you of endless distance, yet curiously silent, as if no one waits beyond the curtain. Even time itself, which you trust as a steady river, feels mechanical when studied closely, ticking forward in discrete instants, digital frames masquerading as fluid continuity, a film reel spun too quickly for the eye to detect. The first crack is not loud, not dramatic, but subtle, like noticing the faint seam in a painting's corner, or a faint flicker at the edge of your vision that suggests the program is struggling to render, reminding you that the canvas you walk upon may not be infinite, but only convincingly large. Scientists, philosophers, dreamers, they all stumble upon the same haunting thought. Are we explorers of reality, or simply students of the code decoding the lines of an architecture we cannot touch? Each discovery, whether it be gravity, electricity, or relativity, seems less like invention and more like unlocking a rule already written, a command stored somewhere beyond reach. And what of you, standing here, breathing, heart beating in rhythm, cells dividing with absolute obedience to biological scripts? Are you truly alive, or simply executing instructions? The suspicion grows the longer you gaze upon the precision, until doubt becomes a shadow that trails you everywhere, whispering that the world's perfection might not be proof of divine creation, nor natural chaos, but of careful programming. This is the first crack in reality, the realization that the ground beneath your feet may be less like stone and more like code, less like earth and more like illusion, a flawless construction that has hidden its scaffolding for millennia, waiting only for you to pause, to question, to notice that perhaps, just perhaps, everything you know is too perfect to be real. Long before the hum of machines and the soft glow of screens, there were voices that called the world by another name: a veil, a dream, a theater of shadows meant to distract the eye from a greater design. In the dim chambers of early thought, philosophers and mystics kept a secret in their hands, an uncanny belief that what you accept as real is a performance played upon a stage. And as you stand now, with that modern suspicion in your chest, theirs feels like a familiar echo. Picture Plato's cavern, prisoners bound to stone, watching flickering silhouettes, and insisting those spectral shapes are the whole of existence, never turning to the blinding truth beyond. Hear the distant chant of Maya in the courts of India, where sages called the world illusion and spoke softly of a hidden self, knocked awake only by long patience and fierce renunciation. The Gnostics spoke of a false craftsman, a lesser god, who stitched together a counterfeit sky, while Buddhist practitioners warned of samsara's looping deception, a wheel of becoming that traps thought in habit and sensation. Their language differs, but the rhythm is the same. Do not take the face of things for the thing itself. In the north, poets about runes and norns spun fate as threads woven on a loom, each life a counted stitch in a larger pattern that might be read as code. In Egypt, priests carved hieroglyphs that suggested order hidden behind ritual, as if stone could hold knowledge about the architecture of the cosmos. These are not idle metaphors, but cautious maps left by those who tasted the seam between worlds and returned to tell of its pull. Imagine yourself in a low hall of torchlight, listening to their counsel. The room smells of smoke and dust, the air thick with the cadence of words meant to wake rather than soothe. And you feel a kinship across centuries, because the unease that now pricks your mind is the same unease that troubled their dreams. They wrote their warnings in parable, in temple alignments, in myths that survive as oblique instructions. Perhaps they encoded questions into stone pyramids positioned like punctuation, megaliths arranged like brackets, reminders that the visible landscape might be as deliberate as a crafted interface. Their whispers fold into yours. What if the mountain is only a mask, the river a rendered line, the beloved a simulation of attachment meant to teach or to test? These murmurs do not demand certainty. They only ask that you look more closely, that you sense the possibility of design beneath appearance. And when you return from those ancient corridors, you carry with you their patient doubt, an inheritance as strange and comforting as a relic, proof that across time, humans have always tilted their heads toward the seam and wondered if the world was less a home than a constructed room in which to learn the value of waking. Listen then, for these whispers, they are older than your certainty and truth. It was only in the last flickering century, a mere heartbeat of history, that humanity dared to build its own illusions, and in doing so, stepped closer to the suspicion that perhaps we were only echoing what had been done to us. At first, they were mechanical toys and crude automata, gears and springs that mimicked life clumsily, like children playing at divinity. But as the decades passed and electricity poured through copper veins, the illusions grew sharper, stranger, more convincing, until circuits and code became the new loom upon which reality itself could be stitched. Consider the earliest computers, vast humming engines that filled entire rooms, whirring and clattering like beasts of burden, processing numbers at speeds no human mind could match, their language incomprehensible yet obedient, their power embryonic yet already tinged with the promise of creation. From those hulking ancestors emerged smaller machines, then networks that wove the world together with invisible threads, until billions of lives found themselves suspended in a lattice of signals and screens. And somewhere in the background of that lattice, a quiet question stirred. If we can craft worlds within glass, what stops something greater from crafting us within theirs? Think of the first video games. Their pixelated landscapes, rough and jagged, yet already strange in their allure. Little grids of color that tricked the brain into believing it roamed fields, dungeons, and stars. Then think of how those crude mosaics evolved into photorealistic vistas, sprawling cities, and endless horizons. Digital oceans that sparkle and mountains that cast shadows. Arenas where people now spend hours of their waking lives, convinced not because the illusion is perfect, but because the mind itself completes the fiction. Virtual reality headsets draw this dream even closer, strapping screens to the face so that the senses bow willingly to an artificial world, footsteps echoing in empty rooms while the eyes insist on alien landscapes. And beyond these toys, more sinister simulations bloom quietly in laboratories, models of economies, ecosystems, even human behavior, complex enough to mimic the ebb and flow of entire societies. Do you see the irony? That by weaving our own simulations, we prove the very possibility that once seemed absurd, showing with each advance that consciousness can be lulled into believing in crafted realms, that rules can be written and followed by unknowing actors, that entire lives can unfold in spaces born not of stone or soil, but of code. And so the rise of the machine dream becomes not only a triumph of invention, but a mirror held up to ourselves, reflecting the eerie possibility that we are not the first to play this game, that our ingenuity is less creation than imitation, a faint echo of a grander simulation whose existence we are only beginning to suspect. The machine dream grows, luminous and restless, and with every passing year its grip tightens, whispering that perhaps we build these illusions not merely because we can, but because something within us remembers being inside one all along. When speculation sharpened into philosophy, the ancient whispers of illusion found themselves reborn in the austere language of probability, and in recent decades, one voice in particular has haunted the halls of thought, the philosopher Nick Bostrom, who dared to ask a question so simple yet so devastating that it fractured certainty like glass. If civilizations survive long enough to develop computing power capable of simulating entire realities, then will they not run such simulations? Not once, but countless times, filling their machines with billions of minds who never realize they are artificial. And if so, what are the chances that we are among the rare originals, rather than among the multitude of simulations? The arithmetic is merciless. For if only one advanced species in the cosmos survives its infancy and builds such engines, the number of simulated realities could quickly outnumber base reality by 1,000-fold, 1,000,000-fold, perhaps even beyond calculation, meaning the probability that you and I exist in the one true, original layer dwindles into near impossibility. Imagine yourself standing before a roulette wheel that spins endlessly, its pockets numbered in infinite sequence, and knowing that only one of those countless spaces represents authentic reality, while all others are digital illusions, statistical shadows, and then ask yourself, where do you think the ball will land? The philosophers whisper, not on the rare original, but on one of the innumerable copies. This argument does not rest upon mysticism or faith, but upon the cold logic of mathematics, the chilling neutrality of probability, and it leaves in its wake a silence heavier than belief. For if the numbers favor illusion, then belief in reality becomes an act of will rather than reason. And yet, the philosophers did not leave us with despair alone. They invited us to dwell inside the paradox, to let it bend the contours of thought. For if probability suggests we are simulated, then perhaps our pursuit of truth itself is also a program, a coded curiosity meant to keep us moving along predetermined paths, forever questioning but never quite breaking free. Others have built upon Bostrom's haunting hypothesis, weaving it into debates about consciousness, ethics, and metaphysics, asking whether morality holds meaning if we are simulated actors, or whether the very capacity to love and suffer proves a depth beyond computation. In the dim glow of late-night rooms, philosophers sit with their papers and their equations, yet the weight of the question presses not only upon their tables, but upon your heart as well. Because behind the abstract reasoning lies something visceral, the creeping realization that existence itself may be less a birthright and more a lottery ticket, and the odds have always been stacked against us. And so, probability becomes prophecy, not of doom, but of disquiet, whispering that the philosophers were not merely speculating but diagnosing, and in their careful calculations we hear again the echo of the cave, the veil, the dream, all now cloaked in mathematics, all now pointing to the same unsteady truth that the chances we live in base reality are vanishingly, terrifyingly small. Have you ever felt déjà vu, that eerie repetition, when a moment unfolds exactly as if you had already lived it? The sense that reality is not flowing forward, but looping back upon itself like a line of corrupted code, replaying a hesitation in the machine that renders life momentarily unstable? These are the subtle fractures that some call glitches in the system, strange anomalies that feel like whispers from beneath the surface, cracks in the digital plaster of the world's stage. They manifest as flickers in perception, coincidences too precise to dismiss, numbers that repeat endlessly, dreams that bleed into waking, and scientific mysteries that refuse to yield as though the program cannot fully conceal its scaffolding. Quantum physics, that most unsettling of sciences, tells us particles behave like ghosts, appearing only when observed, collapsing into being beneath the gaze of consciousness, as though reality itself is economical with its rendering, showing only what must be seen, hiding the rest in shadow until required. The double-slit experiment, with its baffling outcome, suggests not a solid universe, but a probabilistic theater, where possibilities ripple until attention crystallizes them into one fragile frame. Computer scientists point to the limits of the universe, the so-called Planck length, the smallest measurable distance, as though reality has pixels, resolution too fine for our eyes, but clear enough for our instruments, suggesting not infinity but boundaries, not endlessness but a grid. Even the speed of light, that ultimate barrier, feels less like a natural property and more like a processing cap, the maximum speed at which data can travel across the network of existence. And then there are the stories, whispered and eerie. Pilots describing skies that freeze, landscapes glitching like corrupted textures, individuals recalling days when reality itself felt delayed, slowed, or staggered, as though the system was struggling to keep up with demand. Most dismiss these tales as hallucination or coincidence, yet within them lurks a pattern that feels uncomfortably familiar, the way a gamer recognizes the bug in their own simulation, the artifact in the rendering engine. Could it be that these strange experiences are not failures of human perception, but failures of the program itself? Minor fractures where the mask slips? Imagine standing at the edge of a vast mural and suddenly noticing the brushstrokes, realizing the sky is not endless blue, but paint layered on canvas. Such is the sensation of encountering a glitch. It may last a second, vanish in a blink, but its impact lingers, gnawing at certainty, reminding you that the world you walk through might not be seamless after all. Each anomaly accumulates like data points in a growing file, and though alone they can be dismissed, together they whisper, the system is not flawless, and if there are glitches, then there is code, and if there is code, then there is a coder. If the world is a simulation, then the question that haunts us most is whether we are truly free, or merely actors following a script too vast for us to perceive. You imagine yourself standing at a crossroads, heart pounding as you weigh choices, believing your will to be sovereign, yet what if every hesitation, every lean toward left or right, is already written in invisible lines of code that guide you as surely as gravity pulls a stone toward the earth? Philosophers have long debated the existence of free will, yet in the context of a simulated world, the debate takes on a new darkness. For a simulation by definition requires rules, and rules imply boundaries, and boundaries restrict what can and cannot be done. Neuroscientists whisper of experiments where the brain shows signs of decision before the mind becomes aware, milliseconds where the choice is already inscribed before you feel it, a disquieting suggestion that consciousness is not commander but observer, narrating a story already unfolding beneath its control. Imagine then that free will is the greatest illusion of all, a feature programmed to convince us of our autonomy, while in truth, each action, thought, and desire is drawn from a library of predetermined responses. Yet what if this illusion is itself intentional, designed not to enslave, but to teach, to give the actors in the simulation the sense of agency required for meaning to exist? For without the belief in choice, love becomes hollow, struggle becomes meaningless, sacrifice becomes empty. Thus the paradox emerges. Even if our choices are coded, their weight to us remains real, and perhaps that subjective reality is all that matters. The prisoner in Plato's cave may not have chosen his chains, yet his longing for the light was genuine, and his journey upward, though perhaps scripted, carried a truth no less profound. In this view, free will may not be the freedom to act beyond the code, but the freedom to find meaning within it, to respond authentically to what appears before us, even if the stage and script were chosen long ago. Still, the question lingers like smoke. Are you free? Or are you only programmed to feel free? And if the latter, does that not suggest that somewhere beyond the veil lies a hand that moves you, unseen, guiding your every step, reminding you with each breath that you may not be the author of your story after all? If we are inside a simulation, then someone or something must be watching. And this thought chills the soul more than the simulation itself, for it implies an audience beyond our comprehension, gazing silently through the cracks, patient, detached, perhaps curious, perhaps indifferent. You imagine eyes that never close, surveying every heartbeat, every whispered prayer, every failure and triumph, not as sacred events, but as data points in an unfathomable experiment. Who are these watchers? Some say gods in another guise, omnipotent beings cloaked not in robes of divinity, but in the machinery of a civilization so advanced that their technology is indistinguishable from the miraculous. Others whisper that they may be our own descendants, playing with the past, recreating the lives of ancestors to learn from mistakes, to relive history, or simply to be entertained by the struggles of their progenitors, much as we create games to observe simulated lives and dramas unfold on digital stages. There is also the darker speculation that the watchers are indifferent, treating us as laboratory specimens, monitoring us only to harvest data, running scenarios not to reveal truth, but to gather outcomes. Like scientists testing endless variables in a controlled experiment, consider the mythologies of old, the gods of Olympus peering down from their mountain, the pantheon of Egypt observing from the stars, the stern deities of monotheism who record every deed in celestial ledgers. Perhaps these were not divine inventions, but cultural memories of something real, an ancient intuition that our lives are always observed, always scrutinized, never truly private. If watchers exist, then what do they seek in us? Do they hope for our awakening, or are they amused by our blindness? Are they benevolent teachers or cold architects? The question gnaws, for in the absence of answers, every possibility feels both terrifying and strangely inevitable. And yet, perhaps the most unsettling idea is this, that we cannot ever truly know, for the watchers control not only the stage, but the spotlight, allowing us to see only what they wish, leaving the rest hidden in darkness, just beyond the veil, while we perform, unaware, before an audience that never applauds. Reality, when examined too closely, trembles like a dream on the verge of dissolving, and the more you search for solidity, the more it slips away, reminding you that existence is less like stone and more like mist, less like iron and more like glass that shatters when struck. Consider how easily your own consciousness drifts from waking into sleep, how vivid a dream can feel in the moment, convincing you utterly until morning light exposes its fragility. And then imagine that waking life is itself another dream, one layer deeper, but no less fragile. Time, which you trust as constant, bends under gravity's weight, flowing differently for those who move swiftly or dwell in cosmic depths. Space, which you see as endless, warps and curves, stretching like fabric under invisible hands. Matter, which you touch as solid, dissolves into atoms, then into particles, then into probability waves, until nothing remains but ghostly mathematics. Reality, it seems, is only as real as the limits of your perception allow, and when those limits shift, reality itself shifts with them. Imagine an ancient city crumbling into dust, its temples and statues once thought eternal, now nothing but fragments buried in sand. Such is the fate of all forms, and perhaps of reality itself, a structure destined to erode, revealing the emptiness beneath. If we live in a simulation, then reality is fragile, not only philosophically but literally, dependent upon the processing power of its host, vulnerable to collapse, to glitches, to shutdown. One flicker of the unseen system, and all you know, sky, sea, memory, identity, could vanish like smoke, leaving nothing behind but silence. This fragility does not diminish the beauty of existence. Rather, it intensifies it, reminding you that every moment is precious, because it may be fleeting, every breath, a fragile spark in a system that could extinguish it without warning. And perhaps it is this fragility that is the truest clue of all. The whisper that reality is not self-sustaining but maintained. A delicate balance held in place not by its own strength but by something beyond it. Something or someone that ensures the dream continues just a little longer. If you've been captivated by this journey through mystery and possibility, consider supporting our channel. Your support allows us to continue creating immersive, thought-provoking documentaries that explore the hidden corridors of history, science, and myth. By becoming part of our community, you help us unlock new stories and deeper investigations into the enigmas that shape our understanding of reality. Whether through subscribing, sharing, or joining as a patron, every gesture ensures that this exploration continues, and that together, we keep pulling back the veils of the unknown. Throughout history, whispers of hidden codes have threaded through the fabric of human culture, as if ancient civilizations sensed the unreality of their world and sought to leave cryptic markers for future generations to uncover. Faint fingerprints of the simulation itself, pressed into stone, scripture, and myth. Consider the Pythagoreans, who believed numbers were not only tools of measurement but divine principles, the very skeleton of reality, symbols that revealed the unseen order beneath appearances. Or the architects of the Great Pyramids, who aligned colossal blocks of stone not by accident, but with celestial precision, embedding astronomical knowledge into monuments that still defy explanation, as if to declare that reality itself is structured mathematically, like code awaiting discovery. Religious texts, too, are riddled with numerology, sequences, and prophecies that seem less like human invention and more like encrypted messages, the binary of the divine, hidden within the sacred. Modern researchers find echoes of fractals in Gothic cathedrals, Fibonacci spirals in Hindu temples, and geometric harmonies in Mayan glyphs, patterns too universal to be coincidence, too deliberate to be dismissed. Could it be that these civilizations glimpsed the scaffolding of the simulation, interpreting the cosmic program through their own symbolic languages? Even myths speak of veils, illusions, and layered worlds. The Hindu concept of Maya, the Gnostic idea of a false creator imprisoning humanity, the Platonic vision of shadows on the cave wall, all stories that suggest reality is not what it seems, but a mask, a performance, a carefully rendered stage. Cryptographers today marvel at prime numbers, sequences that seem both infinite and foundational, suspecting that such mathematical phenomena might be signatures of artificiality, the watermark of a designed universe. And then there are the darker suspicions that wars, rises and falls of empires, even pandemics and disasters, follow cycles too precise, too patterned, as if history itself is a simulation, running scripts, variations on themes played out endlessly to generate data, each epoch a test, each civilization a scenario, each collapse a line of code executed perfectly on schedule. If that is true, then history is not random chaos but structured iteration, and the codes left behind are not mystical accidents but intentional breadcrumbs, guiding us toward the realization that we are not the first to ask the question, nor the last. The ancients may have lacked our machines, but they possessed the same unease, the same intuition that reality is fragile, constructed, and coded, leaving us their warnings in stone, scripture, and stars, daring us to look closer, to read the hidden text of time itself. Modern science, with all its rigor and skepticism, has begun to brush against the same unsettling conclusions that mystics and philosophers hinted at for millennia, and in laboratories lit by sterile fluorescent light, equations and experiments whisper the same message as myths once shouted: that reality may not be ultimate, but constructed, provisional, a simulation hidden beneath the guise of natural law. Physicists probing the quantum realm find not solidity but probability, particles appearing and disappearing like fleeting calculations, their behavior changing when observed, as though the act of measurement itself triggers the rendering of the program. Cosmologists ponder why the constants of the universe are so finely tuned, balanced to absurd precision, the exact values necessary for life to exist. One fraction altered, and stars would not burn, atoms would not bond, life would not arise. Is this delicate balance the result of infinite universes, each with different constants? Or is it the sign of design, a system configured to allow its characters to play out their roles? Computer scientists note peculiarities: the finite resolution of spacetime, the Planck scale that prevents infinity, the maximum speed of light like a processing cap, the potential discreteness of energy suggesting pixels rather than continuity. Even information theory enters the stage, with some suggesting that the universe is not matter but information, not substance but code, woven into the very fabric of reality. The holographic principle, a radical but increasingly considered theory, suggests that the universe is not three-dimensional at all, but projected from two-dimensional data on a distant cosmic boundary, as if reality is no more than a high-resolution display generated from compressed code. Some, like Nick Bostrom, put forth the famous argument: if it is possible to simulate consciousness, and if civilizations continue to advance, then the number of simulated beings will vastly outnumber the real ones, and the odds suggest overwhelmingly that we are more likely to be simulated than original. The more science advances, the thinner the veil becomes, until the language of physics and the language of mythology converge in their conclusion. What you touch, taste, and see may not be the final truth, but an interface, a user-friendly illusion crafted for inhabitants of a system too vast to comprehend. And so, the scientist joins the mystic, the mathematician joins the poet, both staring into the abyss and seeing not chaos but order, not randomness but program, not reality but simulation. Across cultures, myths have carried warnings, like messages in bottles cast into the sea of time, stories of false worlds, deceiving gods, and hidden veils, their imagery poetic, but their message chillingly consistent. Beware, for what you see is not all there is, and what you believe to be real may only be a mask. In Hindu philosophy, Maya is the illusion that ensnares the soul, a shimmering veil concealing ultimate reality, binding beings to cycles of desire and suffering until they awaken. In Gnostic tradition, the world is said to be crafted not by a benevolent creator, but by a false demiurge, a cosmic jailer, who traps humanity in a counterfeit reality, distracting them from the divine truth beyond. In Norse myth, the trickster Loki spins illusions that confound even gods, blurring truth and falsehood until calamity follows. While in Greek lore, Persephone eats the seeds of Hades' fruit, binding her to a shadow realm that mirrors the real, but is not it. Even the Mayans spoke of ages that ended in destruction, worlds that were built and rebuilt, simulations reset after failure, each epoch another trial of humanity. Could these stories be more than metaphor? Could they be the encoded memories of civilizations before us who sensed the edges of the program and sought to warn their descendants? Think of the Tower of Babel, humanity's ambition to breach the heavens thwarted not by natural accident, but by intervention, as though the system itself enforced limits, scattering languages to preserve the game. Think of the Garden of Eden, a paradise where humans lived unaware of their condition until they tasted knowledge, awakening to the artificiality of their state and being cast into a harsher, truer existence. Each myth carries a structure familiar to us. A veil conceals reality, transgression pierces it, knowledge awakens, and punishment follows. These myths may not merely entertain but caution. Do not dig too deeply, do not seek the wires behind the stage, for awakening comes with cost, and those who attempt to pierce the veil may not like what they find. Myths, in this sense, are less stories than warnings, their metaphors less symbolic than literal, teaching generation after generation the uneasy truth. Reality is fragile, manipulated, and potentially false, and those who seek to unmask it must prepare for what lies beyond. As science and myth converge, as whispers of code echo across time, something within the human mind begins to collapse. Certainty, that once solid fortress built on assumptions of permanence and truth, begins to crumble into dust, leaving in its place only shadows, only suspicion, only trembling questions that echo louder the more you try to silence them. Certainty once told you that the world was firm, that the ground beneath your feet was unshakable stone, that the stars above were eternal and indifferent to human fragility, that the choices you make were sovereign, unbound by forces unseen. But each discovery chips away at this fortress, revealing that solidity is probability, permanence is illusion, and autonomy may be the most carefully constructed story of all. Consider how the Newtonian universe, once hailed as a clockwork of perfect precision, dissolved beneath Einstein's revelations, where time and space warp like malleable fabric, bending in ways that made old laws seem like children's tales. Then consider how Einstein's world itself shivered beneath the quantum, where particles refused to stay put, probability reigned, and observation itself seemed to conjure existence out of shadow. Certainty collapses again when technology reminds you that much of what you see can be fabricated deepfakes, indistinguishable from reality. Simulations so precise they fool not only the eye but the heart, and artificial minds capable of weaving truths from nothing. Religions, too, find their pillars trembling at the thought that creation may not be the sacred act of a benevolent hand, but the clever engineering of a hidden civilization, or worse, a machine devoid of compassion. Even personal identity is shaken. For if memories are nothing more than neural sequences, could they not be rewritten, altered, or fabricated entirely by a program? What does it mean to be you, if your past, your preferences, even your deepest loves, could be variables adjusted in the code? The collapse of certainty is terrifying, for it strips you of the anchors you thought immovable, leaving you adrift in an ocean without compass or shore. Yet it is also liberating, for when the chains of assumption break, new horizons reveal themselves, vast and strange, urging you to question not only what is real, but why reality exists at all. To realize that the world is fragile is to recognize that it can be questioned, and to question is to begin awakening, even if awakening means standing on trembling ground. And yet, as you cross this threshold, as certainty dissolves into uncertainty, you must ask, will you find freedom on the other side? Or only deeper layers of illusion stacked endlessly, one veil concealing another, with no final truth waiting beneath? What if ours is not the only simulation, but merely one of countless layers, echoes of realities, stacked upon realities like mirrors, reflecting into infinity, each one spawning the next in a cascade of artificial worlds that ripple outward with no beginning and no end? Imagine civilizations far older than ours, masters of technology we cannot comprehend, building simulations to test possibilities, to explore outcomes, to create universes, not as playgrounds but as laboratories of reality, each iteration birthing billions of conscious beings who believe themselves authentic, who love, who suffer, who pray, all while existing only as lines of code running on a processor hidden beyond their sky. Now imagine that within those simulations, some of those beings rise to technological heights themselves, building their own simulations, filling them with consciousness, unaware that they too are only shadows of shadows, dreamers inside dreams. If so, the question of whether we are real becomes meaningless. For reality itself is only relative, defined not by origin, but by experience, by whether the world feels consistent, functional, and lived. Stories of déjà vu, of lives remembered from past centuries, of strange dreams that feel like migrations between worlds, may not be fantasies but echoes of neighboring simulations bleeding through the cracks. Ancient traditions of reincarnation and cyclical ages might be memory fragments of previous runs, echoes of resets that destroyed one world only to spawn another, each with slight variations, each a new trial. If we are echoes, then perhaps even our awakening is pre-scripted, the awareness of the simulation itself, just another scenario being tested, another variable in the experiment. This infinite regress of simulations breeds a peculiar horror, that there may be no base reality, no ultimate ground, only layers upon layers of constructed worlds, a tower of mirrors where every reflection believes itself original while being only an echo of another. Yet there is also strange comfort in this thought, for it means that meaning need not come from authenticity. Even in an echo, love is felt, choices matter, beauty exists, and experience carries weight. Still, the thought lingers like a shadow. If echoes abound, then what happens when the resonance fades, when a simulation collapses? Do the souls within vanish into nothing, or do they echo onward into the next layer? Fragments of memory drifting like dust from one mirrored world to another, forever seeking the origin that may not exist at all. If a simulation exists, then hidden somewhere within its structure must lie the signature of its creator. For no artist, no architect, no coder can resist leaving traces of themselves in their work, whether intentional or accidental, patterns that betray the hand behind the mask. Scientists have long searched for such a mark in the universe itself, scanning the cosmic background radiation for anomalies, patterns too deliberate to be random, as if the programmer left a watermark in the static of creation. Mathematicians marvel at the elegance of physical laws, the symmetry of equations, the way the universe speaks in numbers at all, suggesting that reality is not chaos, but code, that behind the wild dance of galaxies lies an algorithm of breathtaking simplicity. Some point to prime numbers, those strange, indivisible entities, as potential signatures, while others whisper that the mysterious alignment of cosmic structures, the great wall of galaxies, the uncanny uniformity of cosmic microwave background may be deliberate artifacts, hints from the designer. Even life itself appears coded, DNA unfolding like software, instructions compressed into a language of 4 letters, capable of building worlds of flesh and thought from nothing but sequence and logic. Could it be that the programmer's signature is written into our very cells, waiting for us to decipher it, a message woven into our essence? Some speculate that déjà vu, synchronicities, or even dreams may be winks from the programmer, reminders that we are within their creation, little glitches left like breadcrumbs for the curious. Others imagine more deliberate Easter eggs, hidden truths placed for those who dare to look deeply, numbers that repeat across cultures, constants that defy explanation, myths that converge despite distance and time. The thought is both comforting and terrifying. Comforting because it suggests the existence of an author, that our world is not meaningless chaos. Terrifying because the author remains silent, distant, perhaps indifferent, their motives unfathomable. What if the signature is not for us at all, but for other programmers, a mark of authorship left in the code, like an artist's initials at the corner of a painting, invisible to the subjects within the canvas? Still, the possibility of a signature keeps humanity searching. For in that search lies hope, that if the mask slips, if the code is revealed, then perhaps we may glimpse the face behind the program and finally understand who or what built the world we call real. To awaken to the possibility of simulation is to walk a razor's edge between revelation and annihilation. For knowledge may free you, but it may also mark you for deletion. the system protecting itself from those who dared to peer too far beyond the curtain. Myths have warned of this for millennia. Adam and Eve cast out of Eden for tasting forbidden knowledge. Prometheus chained for stealing divine fire. Icarus plummeting for flying too near the Sunday. Each story carries the same shadowed warning that awakening carries risk, and those who grasp too much truth may not survive it. Imagine if the simulation is built to test obedience, to separate the sleepers from the seekers, rewarding those who remain docile with comfortable illusion, while pruning away those who awaken, resetting them, deleting them, or perhaps transferring them into another state of being entirely. To awaken might be to escape the game, to step into the higher reality that coded this one. But it could just as easily mean the end of the self you know, your memories erased, your identity dissolved like data overwritten by a new file. Perhaps deletion and awakening are not opposites, but the same event, one experienced as death, the other as rebirth, a transition beyond comprehension. Some believe awakening is the very purpose of the simulation, that the glitches, the myths, the codes, the strange repetitions are all deliberate clues placed to guide the curious toward truth, breadcrumbs for those with eyes to see. Others fear that awakening is an error, a malfunction in the system, and that those who glimpse the wires behind the walls are swiftly removed to preserve the integrity of the illusion for the rest. In this tension lies humanity's deepest dilemma. Do we cling to the comfort of illusion, to the stability of a world that feels real, even if it is false? Or do we risk everything to pierce the veil, to awaken, even if awakening means erasure? Perhaps the only true act of freedom within the simulation is the choice to seek, to pursue truth, despite its cost, to prefer awakening over sleep, even when the outcome is unknown. Yet even as you imagine awakening, a chill passes. What if you have already been deleted before, reset, your past lives erased, your consciousness recycled into new scenarios, your memory of the awakening stripped away, leaving only an echo of unease, a whisper of suspicion? Beyond all speculation, beyond glitches, myths, codes, and warnings, lies the ultimate question. What happens when the final veil is pierced? When the last illusion dissolves, and reality or its absence is revealed? Perhaps the final veil is death itself, the moment when consciousness slips from the body and enters the unknown, a transition not into nothingness but into the deeper layers of the system or beyond the system entirely. Near-death experiences often describe tunnels of light, presences waiting, overwhelming peace or terror, phenomena that may be interpreted as glimpses of what waits beyond the program, an exit screen carefully rendered to guide the user into another state. Mystics across traditions speak of enlightenment as the piercing of illusion, the realization that the world is dream, that the self is illusion, and that beyond it lies union with the infinite, which may be the original reality or simply another higher-level simulation. Scientists, cautious and bound to evidence, admit that there are boundaries they cannot cross, places where instruments fail, equations collapse, and only silence remains. A silence that feels less like absence and more like a locked door. Whatever the final veil conceals, it is the place where certainty cannot follow, the point where all philosophies and sciences must fall silent, leaving only faith, imagination, or surrender. Yet the very existence of the veil suggests design, for a veil is a deliberate thing, a boundary placed not by accident but by intention, separating the known from the unknown, the player from the truth of the game. To pierce it may be terrifying, for it may mean annihilation, but it may also be beautiful, for it may mean revelation. All signs point toward its existence: the fragility of reality, the echoes of simulations, the strange codes of myth and mathematics, all converging to whisper that what you see is not the end. The final veil may conceal the most terrifying truth or the most liberating one, but either way, It is the threshold we must all cross, willingly or not, when the program reaches its end. And so, if we are indeed inside a simulation, the question that remains is not whether it is true, but how we should live within it, knowing that every tree, every star, every face and memory may be nothing more than code rendered for our senses, crafted illusions with no permanence beyond the program. Some may despair at this, believing life meaningless, their triumphs scripted, their struggles artificial, their loves nothing more than data points in an elaborate experiment. Yet others may find a strange liberation in the idea, realizing that meaning is not given from outside, but created within, that even in a constructed stage, beauty remains real to the one who perceives it, joy is genuine to the one who feels it, and choice carries weight even if its outcomes are bounded by unseen algorithms. To live inside a simulation is to recognize fragility not as a curse, but as a gift, for every moment becomes precious, precisely because it may be fleeting. Every connection matters, because it may be the only anchor in an ocean of illusion. Perhaps the purpose of the simulation is not to enslave us, but to teach us, to shape consciousness through the crucible of experience, to let us discover that meaning is not handed down but forged in fire, chosen freely within constraints. Perhaps the truest act of defiance is not despair but creation. To write, to love, to build, to seek truth even when the walls themselves may be false. For if the simulation is designed to test us, then let us pass by refusing apathy, by embracing wonder, by daring to ask questions the program may not want answered. And if someday the simulation ends, if the program shuts down, the veil dissolves, and we awaken elsewhere, whether into a higher reality, a programmer's lab, or something beyond imagination, then let us carry with us the knowledge that even inside illusion, we lived fully, bravely, and with awe. For in the end, whether real or simulated, the experience of living is undeniable, and it is within that experience, fragile though it may be, that our meaning, our beauty, and perhaps even our freedom truly reside. And so, the question remains unanswered, lingering in the quiet, like a whisper. Are we living in reality, or in its imitation? Perhaps the truth will never be revealed. Perhaps the final veil will never fall. Yet the wonder lies not in the answer, but in the asking, in the willingness to gaze beyond the shadows and wonder what waits in the dark. Tonight, as you drift into dreams, remember, whether reality is real or simulated, the mystery remains, vast and endless, wrapping you